At the foot of the deep green mountains of North Carolina, there's a place people call the largest house in America. But Biltmore has never been just a house. It is the dream of one man, the ambition of an entire era, and also a mirror reflecting the loneliness that lies behind extreme wealth. Imagine the feeling of stepping into a mansion with hundreds of rooms, corridors so long that the sound of your own footsteps echoes like whispers from the past. Here, some of the most lavish parties once took place, where the elite laughed, raised their glasses, and believed that money could buy anything. But can it buy happiness? Can it truly fill the empty spaces within the human soul? George Vanderbilt did not build Biltmore simply to live in. He built it to prove himself, to carve his name into American history. Yet behind that overwhelming beauty, what truly remains? Pride or the fear of being forgotten? A celebration of life or a quiet escape from loneliness? There are rooms where laughter was never heard. There are long nights lit only by candlelight and silence. There are stories never written into history books, stories of those who lived and worked in the shadow of immense wealth, of losses that no amount of money could ever replace. Today, we enter Biltmore not to admire its luxury, but to listen to what it has to tell. A story about humanity, ambition, culture, and the true price of owning everything. What is Biltmore? To many people, it is simply a mansion. But in the context of American history, Biltmore is a declaration, a statement that in a nation without kings or royalty, individuals could still build kingdoms of their own, through wealth, ambition, and an unshakable belief in personal power. Biltmore rests quietly in the Asheville Valley, surrounded by layered mountain forests. From the very first moment one sees it, it no longer feels like a house. It resembles a European castle transplanted to the New World, massive, proud, and almost detached from the world around it. The scale of Biltmore surpasses imagination. More than 250 rooms, dozens of grand halls, sweeping staircases, soaring ceilings, and corridors so long that a person feels small walking through them. Yet Biltmore's sense of awe does not come from size alone. It comes from the feeling that this place was created to make anyone stop, look up, and wonder. How could one person own all of this? How could a single family gather enough power, wealth, and influence to turn such an extravagant dream into reality? Inside Biltmore is an entire world in miniature. A library holding thousands of rare volumes, where knowledge was valued as highly as gold. A vast dining hall where banquets lasted for hours, candlelight reflecting off the elegant attire of the elite. Guest bedrooms, each designed in a different style, as if every visitor were an important character in a grand performance called Biltmore. But pause for a moment. Try to place yourself in the lives of those who lived and worked here. The servants who rose before dawn, quietly moving through cold corridors to prepare another day of luxury for others. The gardeners who tended every tree and flower bed to keep the grounds flawless. For them, Biltmore was both a livelihood and an invisible boundary between two worlds, one of excess and one of silent labor. Biltmore also reflects the spirit of America at the end of the 19th century, a nation on the rise, confident in progress, believing there were no limits to success. This was not only George Vanderbilt's home, but a symbol of an era in which people believed that through willpower and wealth, greatness was within reach. Yet that very grandeur also made Biltmore lonely. In such vast spaces, emptiness can take hold. Amid overwhelming splendor, a question begins to surface. Does a place this large truly offer a sense of belonging, or does it merely magnify the distance between people and their own emotions? Biltmore is overwhelming in stone, in wood, in art. But above all, it is overwhelming in the questions it raises about humanity itself. Why do we build things on such a grand scale? And when we have everything, what is left inside us? To understand how Biltmore could exist, one must return to the Vanderbilt family itself. Not to the glittering ballrooms or tailored suits, but to a single, very ordinary, almost austere man. Cornelius Vanderbilt, the founder of the entire dynasty, was born into poverty, raised amid the smell of sea salt and the wind whipping across aging ships. He did not inherit wealth. He seized it through survival instinct, bold risk-taking, and a will that was nearly ruthless. Cornelius made his fortune first in shipping, then in railroads, the lifeblood of an industrializing America. While others hesitated, he wagered everything. While others feared loss, he expanded. Vanderbilt money did not come from luck, but from cold calculation in business and an ability to see the future years before others did. Each dollar accumulated became not just wealth, but power. That wealth did not stop with one generation. It was passed down, swollen, spread outward like a river, constantly depositing new layers. By the time it reached George Vanderbilt, money was no longer a question. It became a foundation, a launchpad for dreams far beyond ordinary needs. George was born into privilege, educated rigorously, and exposed early to European art and culture. He did not need to prove that he was rich. He wanted to prove that his family deserved to be remembered. The vast Vanderbilt fortune was born from an America in rapid expansion. Railroads stretched across the land. Goods flowed, cities rose, and amid this hunger for growth, the Vanderbilt family stood at the center. At the same time, the gap between rich and poor grew ever more visible. While train cars carrying wealth rolled forward, millions of laborers lived in harsh conditions, working relentlessly to fuel the prosperity of a small elite. George Vanderbilt grew up surrounded by abundance, yet carried within him an emptiness difficult to name. He had money, knowledge, and time. What he lacked was a sense of belonging, a mark that would distinguish him from his many relatives. Biltmore was born from that longing. It was built not only with money, but with the invisible pressure of being born into an enormous family, where each individual must find a way to justify their own worth. The Vanderbilt family stands as a symbol of the American dream, but also as a bitter reminder of the cost of immense wealth. Behind the staggering numbers are people driven by ambition, fear, and very real loneliness. And from that fortune, from that flowing current, Biltmore began to take shape, a monument both magnificent and heavy, belonging to a family determined never to be forgotten. When money is no longer a limitation, the only question left is what a person truly wants. For George Vanderbilt, that question was anything but simple. He did not need another house, nor did he need to prove that he belonged to the upper class. His ambition ran deeper, quieter, and far more personal than anyone could see from the outside. George Vanderbilt was not a loud man. He was reserved, fond of books and art, and spent more time in reflection than in display. In a family where wealth was measured by scale and speed of expansion, George longed for something different. He wanted to create a space for his inner life, a place that could hold knowledge, beauty, and a sense of calm he could not find in the noisy cities of an industrializing America. The idea of Biltmore was born from his travels in Europe. George walked through ancient castles, hushed libraries, and gardens tended for centuries. There, he realized that architecture was not merely about grandeur. It was an extension of thought, culture, and the desire to leave a mark for future generations. When he returned to America, George carried with him a dream: to build a place that was not only large, but alive with a soul. Yet that ambition was inseparable from pressure. As the youngest son in the Vanderbilt family, George lived under the immense shadow of money and reputation. Every decision was compared. Every choice was weighed. Biltmore thus became both a dream and an answer. It told the world that he was not merely an heir, but a creator. The construction of Biltmore was a long, consuming journey. Thousands of workers labored for years under harsh conditions. Stone was quarried, timber transported, and every detail finished with near absolute precision. George followed each stage closely, not just as an owner, but as an artist completing the work of his life. He demanded perfection, believing that only perfection was worthy of the dream he pursued. Building Biltmore was also a way for George to converse with himself. Within its vast spaces, he sought silence. Behind its thick walls and high ceilings, he searched for a sense of safety. Biltmore became a refuge, a place where he could withdraw from a world of competition and expectation. Yet at the same time, it magnified loneliness. A house too large can make a person feel more lost than protected. Culturally, Biltmore reflects an America in search of its own identity. No longer fully imitating Europe, yet not entirely free from the old world's influence, the nation stood between two currents. George Vanderbilt stood there as well. He combined modern American engineering with European artistic spirit, creating a structure both innovative and nostalgic. This was not only personal ambition, but a desire to place America alongside older civilizations. In the end, Biltmore does not simply tell the story of a mansion built with money. It tells the story of a man searching for meaning in his life. George Vanderbilt's ambition was not to possess, but to leave something behind. To leave a mark, a question, and a creation that would cause future generations to pause, reflect, and ask themselves, when people have everything within their grasp, what truly drives them to build something so grand? Stepping into Biltmore, the first thing one feels is not wealth, but the sensation of being swallowed by space. The architecture does not rush to show off. It unfolds slowly, layer by layer, as if testing the patience and emotions of those who enter. Every wall, every stone column carries intention, not merely to support the structure, but to tell a story of power, knowledge, and control. Biltmore was designed in the style of a French Renaissance chateau, but it is not a mechanical imitation. George Vanderbilt and his architect selected, blended, and adapted elements so that the building would breathe with old European grandeur while fitting the vast American landscape. The high vaults, tall windows, and deep corridors create the feeling that the space has no true end. As people walk through it, they feel small, contemplative, and begin an unspoken dialogue with themselves. What truly sets Biltmore apart lies in its obsessive attention to detail. Ceilings are not merely coverings, but storytellers through intricate patterns. Staircases are not simply for climbing, but for guiding the eye and shaping emotion. Light is carefully calculated. By day it pours through large windows. By night it reflects from candles and lamps, creating layers of brightness and shadow that blur the line between reality and memory. The Biltmore Library is one of the spaces that most clearly reveals George Vanderbilt's inner world. Thousands of books line the towering walls, a quiet declaration that knowledge is valued as if not more than luxury. This is not a place for display, but for listening. Standing there, one feels as though being watched by the thoughts of the past, by questions that have never found complete answers. Hidden behind this beauty are details that make visitors pause. Small doors leading to secondary passages, narrow, dimly lit corridors, rooms whose purposes are never fully explained. Some spaces were designed to vanish from the guest's sight, reserved for servants and the unseen labor that kept luxury running smoothly. Biltmore is therefore not just a residence, but a vast machine where every person has a place, whether they are visible or not. Many believe there are deeper meanings embedded in Biltmore's layout. Rooms facing specific directions, paintings placed in puzzling locations, corridors designed to make newcomers lose their way. Some see this as an expression of the owner's absolute control. Others believe it was George Vanderbilt's way of creating a private world, one governed by his own logic, sealed off from outside intrusion. Biltmore's architecture also reflects the relationship between humanity and nature. The expansive gardens are designed to blend with the surrounding mountains and forests, yet they are far from wild. Everything is arranged. Trees are trimmed, paths defined, water carefully guided. This is nature disciplined, much like how people of that era believed the world itself could be mastered through intellect and wealth. Yet within this perfection, a certain coldness emerges. Biltmore is beautiful, but not warm. It is magnificent, but not intimate. Rooms are so large that voices seem to vanish, walls so thick that sound cannot escape. There is a sense that this place was built to keep secrets, to conceal emotion, to create distance between people. The mysteries of Biltmore need no ghost to feel haunting. One only has to stand still, listen, and let the imagination drift down its long corridors to sense the presence of the past. Footsteps long gone, conversations faded, thoughts that once passed through George Vanderbilt's mind as he walked these same spaces. Through its architecture and design, Biltmore reveals more than the wealth of a family. It exposes the inner life of a man who sought control, permanence, and legacy, yet feared emptiness. Every detail feels like a question carved into stone. When humans build walls this thick, what are they protecting, and what are they trying to hide within their own souls? Within the massive stone walls of Biltmore unfolded a life of luxury few places could rival. There, each day passed like a carefully arranged ritual. Parties stretched from afternoon into late night, shimmering lights reflecting off crystal, silver, and silk. Music drifted softly through the grand halls, where impeccably dressed guests conversed about art, politics, journeys across Europe, and the future of a rapidly rising America. All of it formed a dazzling tableau in which abundance seemed entirely natural. Yet such luxury did not exist on its own. It was sustained by hundreds of people working in silence. While guests were still asleep, servants were already awake. They moved quietly through long corridors, preparing breakfast, cleaning rooms, stoking fires, setting tables. Every movement had to be precise, every footstep nearly invisible. In the world of Biltmore, the perfection of elite experience depended on the people behind it remaining unseen. This contrast created a strangely divided rhythm of life. On the same land, two parallel worlds coexisted. One was a world of ball gowns, wine, and laughter. The other was a world of labor, exhaustion, and strict discipline. Those in one world rarely touched the other, though only a wall separated them. And that distance clearly reflected the social contradictions of America at the time. At the end of the 19th century, the United States entered the Gilded Age. Industry expanded, wealth concentrated in the hands of a few families, including the Vanderbilts. For them, luxury was not merely indulgence, it was a symbol. It signaled power, status, and victory in the brutal competition of the era. But beyond Biltmore's gates, millions of other Americans lived very different lives. They worked in factories, on railroads, in mines, earning meager wages and facing uncertain futures. That contrast made Biltmore a focal point of conflicting emotions. Some admired it, seeing it as proof of the American dream. If a family could build such a marvel, then America must indeed be a land of limitless opportunity. Others, however, felt anger, viewing Biltmore as a symbol of injustice, where wealth swelled upon the sweat and labor of the many. Even within Biltmore itself, luxury did not guarantee happiness. Grand parties sometimes concealed emptiness. Rooms filled with people, yet lacking intimacy. George Vanderbilt and his guests could possess every comfort, but they were also trapped by rigid social rules and the pressure to maintain a flawless image. Luxury became a performance, and not everyone felt at ease upon that stage. Culturally, Biltmore reflected the American upper class's desire to rival Europe. Parties were staged in the style of old aristocracy. Cuisine, music, and art were carefully curated to signal refinement. Yet this revealed a deeper contradiction. America was founded on ideals of equality, but at Biltmore, social hierarchy appeared more visible than ever. Life of luxury at Biltmore, therefore, is not merely a story of wealth. It is a story about people in a society undergoing rapid change, about pride mixed with anxiety, about brilliant light masking darker corners. And when the lights dim, when the music stops, what remains is not only a magnificent estate, but a lingering question about the true cost of luxury and whether it can ever truly reconcile the deep divisions within society. When the party lights fade, Biltmore enters another world. A world of silence, where long corridors no longer echo with laughter, only with the wind slipping through window frames and imagined footsteps resonating in the night. It is within this space that darker stories begin to be whispered, passed from one generation to the next, not as absolute truths, but as fragments of emotions that were never fully released. Death did not come to Biltmore in a dramatic way. It arrived quietly, as an inevitable part of a structure too vast, too heavy for human fate. Workers fell during its construction through accidents, exhaustion, and harsh working conditions. Their names were rarely recorded. They exist in Biltmore's history as faint shadows, yet they were the first stones that created the grandeur the world now admires. Within the Vanderbilt family itself, sorrow was no less present. George Vanderbilt lived amid limitless wealth, but his life was far from peaceful. Personal losses, pressures from family and society slowly eroded his spirit. It is said that on certain nights, George wandered alone through the corridors, pausing for long moments before closed doors, as if searching for something that money could never provide. That loneliness gave rise to rumors. Some say Biltmore never truly sleeps, that in the dead of night, when everything is submerged in darkness, faint lights still glow in rooms no one uses. Some claim to hear footsteps on the staircases, even when no one is there. These stories require no proof. They live off the unease that such vast spaces awaken in the human mind. Some visitors recount feeling watched when standing alone in the library or the grand halls. Not by ghosts, but by the lingering presence of the past. The portraits on the walls, the stone statues, seem to carry the gaze of those who once lived, dreamed, and despaired here. It is a sensation that sends a chill, not from fear, but from realizing one is standing within a timeline far greater than oneself. The darker tales of Biltmore also reflect the human psyche when confronted with extreme wealth. When every material need is satisfied, the mind begins to generate other anxieties. Silence becomes oppressive. Vast space amplifies thought. Rumors, therefore, are not merely products of imagination, but ways for people to make sense of their own emotions when faced with emptiness. Culturally, these stories reveal how society views the upper class, with admiration intertwined with suspicion. People long to enter that world, yet fear the price it demands. Biltmore becomes the perfect backdrop for whispers of death and misfortune, because it embodies an immense gap between outward splendor and inner life. Perhaps the darkest truth lies not in supernatural rumors, but in the reality that countless people passed through Biltmore without leaving a trace. They lived, worked, sacrificed, and then vanished from collective memory. The estate remains, towering and beautiful, as if untouched by time or emotion. Thus, the dark stories, the deaths, and the rumors surrounding Biltmore need not be fully believed. They exist to remind us that behind every monumental creation lie hidden corners, that history is written not only in light, but also in shadow. And when people stand before Biltmore's thick stone walls, what sends a chill down their spine is not the presence of ghosts, but the very real sense that this place has witnessed too many dreams, too many losses, and too many stories never fully told. Biltmore is not merely the story of a single family. It is a mirror reflecting a pivotal chapter in American history. When this estate was completed, the United States stood at a crossroads of time, a young nation, filled with ambition, striving to define itself after the great upheavals of war, industrialization, and profound social change. At the end of the 19th century, America entered what is known as the Gilded Age. It was a period marked by the rise of factories, endless stretches of railroad tracks, and wealthy families accumulating fortunes at an unprecedented pace. Biltmore was born in this context, a tangible symbol of the belief that America was no less capable than any European power in wealth, culture, and the ability to create monumental works. Yet Biltmore also reflects the deep contradictions of American history. While the elite built grand estates, millions of others struggled simply to survive. American history is not only the story of winners, but also of those left behind. Biltmore stands between these two currents, both a source of pride and a reminder of the widening gap between rich and poor. As the 20th century arrived, the nation faced new challenges. World wars, economic crises, and shifts in social values led people to question symbols of extreme luxury. But Biltmore, with its enormous scale and staggering cost of maintenance, became a heavy burden. It mirrored America's transformation from a country intoxicated by displays of power to a society forced to reconsider values, responsibility, and sustainability. During difficult periods, Biltmore ceased to be a venue for lavish celebrations. It became a quiet space, where the fragility of wealth and power could be felt more clearly. Rooms once glowing with light fell silent, as if waiting for a new role in the nation's unfolding story. That very silence marked Biltmore's transition from a symbol of opulence to a symbol of memory. Culturally, Biltmore represents America's effort to forge its own identity. It is neither fully European nor purely American. It is a fusion, reflecting a nation learning to stand on its own feet, drawing from the past while searching for the future. The libraries, gardens, and artistic spaces within Biltmore reveal a desire to make culture and knowledge part of elite American life, not merely the accumulation of material wealth. Biltmore also witnessed a shift in how Americans perceive heritage. What was once seen as private property gradually came to be regarded as part of a shared memory. It is preserved not only for its beauty, but for the stories it carries, stories of people, ambition, mistakes, and the maturation of an entire nation. Looking back, Biltmore is no longer simply the Vanderbilt family's estate. It has become a silent witness to American history. It stood as the nation surged forward, as it faltered, and as it learned to reflect upon itself. Within its walls and corridors, one can sense the pulse of a bygone era. Thus, Biltmore carries a meaning far beyond architecture. It reminds us that history is written not only through victory and progress, but through enduring questions about human values. And when Americans walk through Biltmore today, they are not merely visiting a historic mansion. They are entering a dialogue with their own history, with grand dreams, deep contradictions, and the ongoing search for identity of a young yet ambitious nation. Today, Biltmore is no longer the private domain of a powerful family, yet it has never become a soulless place. As its gates open to welcome visitors from around the world, Biltmore steps into a new role. From a mansion born of personal ambition, it has become a living memory of history, a place modern people come not only to see, but to feel. Visitors arrive at Biltmore with many different emotions. Some are overwhelmed from the very first moment, standing before the massive facade and realizing that photographs can never fully convey its true scale. Others walk slowly, very slowly, as if afraid of disturbing the stillness that has existed here for centuries. And some fall completely silent, sensing that they have entered a space where time itself seems to move more slowly. Many visitors say that the first feeling upon entering the Grand Hall is a sense of smallness. Not small because of the size of the architecture, but because of the weight of history. The stone walls, the soaring ceilings, the wide staircases force modern people, accustomed to fast-paced lives, to unconsciously slow their breathing. Some linger for a long time in a corner of a room, not because of an information plaque, but because of an unnameable feeling, as if the place is awakening a memory that does not belong to them, yet still reaches them deeply. Guides at Biltmore often say that no two tours are ever the same, because each visitor brings their own story. Some see Biltmore as the American dream made tangible, a family rising and leaving an indelible mark. Others see excess, a stark contrast between luxury and the reality of life for the majority. And some simply sense a very gentle, very deep sadness, spreading quietly through the corridors. Certain stories are told again and again. Visitors say they feel cold even when the air is not cold, that there are rooms they do not wish to stay in for long without knowing why. Some say that when standing alone in the library, they hear the wooden floor creak softly as if someone has just walked past. These stories are not shared in fear, but with respect, as though Biltmore deserves to be listened to, not questioned. Today, Biltmore is also a place of ordinary human moments. Families walk hand in hand through the gardens. Children run along paths once designed for the aristocracy. Couples stand side by side, taking photographs, trying to capture a present moment within a space shaped by the past. Some older visitors return for a second or third time, because each visit reveals something that resonates with a different stage of their lives. Culturally, Biltmore has become a meeting point between past and present. It no longer belongs solely to the Vanderbilt family, but to collective memory. Exhibitions, events, and preservation efforts take place not to showcase grandeur, but to ensure that Biltmore's story continues to be told slowly and thoughtfully. What is remarkable is that the more people come, the more alive Biltmore feels. Not because of noise, but because of accumulated emotion. Each visitor leaves behind a fragment of thought, a moment of silence, a quiet stir of feeling. And Biltmore, in its own way, absorbs it all. It becomes a place where modern people can confront old questions about success, ambition, and happiness without the pressure of having to answer them immediately. Some leave Biltmore feeling lighter, as if an invisible weight has been lifted. Others depart with more questions than when they arrived. And some carry away a sadness they cannot fully explain, not because of dark stories, but because they realize that even humanity's greatest dreams are not immune to loneliness. Biltmore today no longer whispers of power, but of presence. It does not force visitors to believe anything. It simply places them within a space large enough for reflection. And perhaps that is Biltmore's deepest role in the modern age, not as a tourist attraction, but as a place where people can pause, look into history, and then look back at themselves, standing among walls that have witnessed immense change, yet still remain, patient, waiting to be heard. As the story of Biltmore slowly comes to an end, what remains is not numbers, not size, not monetary value. What remains is something deeply human, a feeling difficult to name, yet persistent, like the lingering echo of a piece of music that has ended but continues to resonate within the listener. Biltmore stands there amid the mountains of North Carolina, like an open-ended question stretching across generations. Why do people build structures on such a grand scale? For the desire to be admired, for the fear of being forgotten, or for something deeper, the need to find meaning in one's own existence. George Vanderbilt may have asked himself that very question during long nights walking through vast corridors, when the silence felt heavier than the noise of the outside world. Biltmore shows that ambition can create beauty, but it can also create emptiness. The larger a house is, the more people it requires to operate it, yet that does not mean it offers warmth. There, one can have everything in hand and still feel that something essential is missing: connection, empathy, a sense of belonging. The greatest question Biltmore leaves behind may not lie in architecture or history, but in ourselves. If we were in George Vanderbilt's position, with unlimited wealth and social power, what would we build? A place to impress or a place to retreat? A symbol for the world to admire or a space to listen to ourselves? And if we could build anything at all, would we have the courage to build a life that is simple yet complete? Biltmore also forces us to confront the contradictions of society. On one side are creativity, progress, and monumental works that shape a nation's image. On the other is the cost-silent labor, widening inequality, and countless individuals whose names are never remembered. History often celebrates the winners, but Biltmore reminds us that behind every triumph are stories that are never fully told. Culturally, Biltmore is a reminder that America, young and dynamic as it is, has long carried a desire for recognition, a wish to stand alongside older civilizations. Yet along that journey, it has also learned that identity does not come only from building grand things, but from how a society treats its people, and from the values it preserves over time. The lesson of Biltmore is not harsh, but it is profound. It shows that money can create space, but it cannot create meaning. Architecture may endure for centuries, but human emotions are fragile. Thick stone walls can shield against wind and rain, but they cannot protect people from loneliness if they fail to find connection with others. When visitors leave Biltmore, each carries a different thought. Some feel admiration, some feel unsettled, some feel sadness, and some feel relief. This reveals that Biltmore does not impose a single message. It simply places people before a mirror large enough for each person to see themselves with their own ambitions, fears, and questions. Perhaps that is Biltmore's greatest value. Not that it is the largest house in America, but that it slows people down. It invites reflection. It compels us to ask what is enough, what is necessary, and what, no matter how hard we try, can never be bought with money. Biltmore has witnessed the birth of a great dream, the rise of a powerful family, and the transformation of an entire nation. But more than anything, it has witnessed people in their most genuine moments, moments of hope, loneliness, ambition, and exhaustion. Moments that anyone in any era can understand. And when the story comes to a close, Biltmore still stands, without explanation, without judgment, simply existing, like a question that has never found a final answer. Between greatness and happiness, which should we choose? Or perhaps the deepest lesson Biltmore offers is a gentle reminder that every structure, no matter how grand, is ultimately only a backdrop. What truly matters is people, and how we live with one another within the spaces we create.